Mangai would be speaking on doing theatre today, creative responses to social challenges. आज के व्याख्यान की सदारत प्रोफेसर संजीव कुमार करेंगे। संजीव ने अपनी शुरुआती पढ़ाई पटना से करी और फिर अपने मास्टर्स के लिए दिल्ली आ गए और दिल्ली से ही पीएचडी करी। फिलहाल दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय के देशबंधु कॉलेज में हिंदी के प्रोफेसर हैं। संजीव की लिखी हुई किताब जैनेन्द्र और अज्ञेय सृजन का सैद्धांतिक नेपथ्य को 2011 में देवीशंकर अवस्थी सम्मान दिया गया। संजीव हिंदी कहानी की 21वीं सदी, पाठ के पास, पाठ से परे, 300 रामायणे और अन्य निबंध जैसी किताबों का संपादन कर चुके हैं। वसुधा डालमिया के साथ बाला बोधिनी का सह संपादन कर चुके हैं। योगेंद्र दत्त के साथ मिलकर वसुधा डालमिया की पुस्तक नेशनलाइजेशन ऑफ हिंदू ट्रेडिशंस, भारतेंदु हरिश्चंद्र एंड 19th सेंचुरी बनारस का हिंदी में अनुवाद कर चुके हैं। तेलंगाना संग्राम पर केंद्रित पी सुंदरैया की किताब के संक्षिप्त संस्करण का हिंदी में अनुवाद तेलंगाना का हथियारबंद जन संघर्ष भी कर चुके हैं। आलोचना के अलावा व्यंग्य, कहानी, निबंध, संस्मरण जैसी विधाओं में लेखन भी करते हैं। संजीव अखिल भारतीय जनवादी लेखक संघ के महासचिव हैं और 2009 से जनवादी लेखक संघ की पत्रिका नया पथ के संपादन से जुड़े हुए हैं। 2018 से राजकमल प्रकाशन की पत्रिका आलोचना का संपादन भी कर रहे हैं। हमें बेहद खुशी है कि संजीव आज के व्याख्यान की सदारत कर रहे हैं। A.Mangai is the pseudonym of Dr. V. Padma. She retired as Associate Professor in English from Stella Maris College, Chennai. Her work as an actor, director, playwright, translator, scholar and activist have intersected through the years, informing, extending and critiquing each other. Her work is enriched by translation and gender practices. She has been a two-time recipient of Fulbright Fellowship. Mangai strives to create a language of theatre from the traditional forms of Tamil Nadu. She has directed over 35 plays, all of which deal with women-centered themes and characters. Mangai is interested in classical Tamil literature from a contemporary perspective of gender, ecology and culture. She has directed 5 plays for the collective Inqalab based on classical Tamil texts. She has evolved 8 plays with Surya Women's Cultural Group in Sri Lanka. Her passion is to concentrate on community theatre to make theatre the voice of the marginalized. Her pioneering work with the transgender community over the past 2 decades has helped form Kannadi Kalai Kuzu. Her collection of plays, Munru Natan, I got the pronunciation right, is prescribed for study at the undergraduate level in many colleges. Her book, Acting Up, Gender and Theatre in India, 1979 onwards, published by Leftward Books, is considered a landmark study and is available at the bookstore outside. And there are several other books that you could go and check out. And there's a 20% discount, so please go and buy these. Her monograph on the Tamil writer Krithika is brought out by the Sahitya Academy. She has written and translated several books. Some of her major translations are Nubhugi Vathiyango's Decolonizing the Mind, Sudhanba Deshpande's Halla Bol, The Death and Life of Safdar Hashmi, and Geeta Hariharan's novel, I Have Become the Tide. We are extremely glad that Mangai is delivering this year's lecture.
Words fail me in expressing my deep sense of honor, solidarity, awe and excitement for this opportunity to deliver the 31st Hashmi Memorial Lecture. Hashmi reinvented himself in the short span of his life in the most creative ways possible. He remains an inspiration and hope for all of us trying to keep democratic processes alive, building art from the ground and daring to collaborate with different forms, artists and genres. Red salute to Comrade Safdar. I've chosen a topic that is practiced on a daily basis at Janam and other theatre groups that keep social change at the core. I also realize that it sounds too ambitious to arrive, in quotes, at a few recipes to help us face the challenges that are mounting against those of us who dream of keeping democracy, dialogue, and diversities alive. What I want to attempt here is to share a few reflections on the decisions we have made in theatre over the past 4 decades in our work in Tamil Nadu. Hopefully, a few snippets of insights and possibilities would emerge that would be useful to all of us here. Also, for theatre practitioners and theatre workers, I hope this would serve as a provocation to connect, engage, and articulate the multiple resources and means that each of us have employed and are available to us at different moments. Theatre as a genre has no past or future in essence. The nature of the form is such that it can exist only in the here and now, as all of us know. That is both the challenge and burden we bear, to be relevant, to make meaning to the now. Whether we take the myths, histories, or her stories, text from faraway lands, sci-fi stories in newer orbits, we have to make sense to our audience today. This applies to all forms, including visually performed traditional forms in India. A self and politically aware artist lays it bare through the narration. Dancer Chandralekha, first slide, recalls how her Arangetram was a charity show in aid of the Rayalaseema Drought Relief Fund. She was dancing Mathura Nagarilo, depicting River Yamuna, Gopikas, Jalakrida, etc., with abundance of water. And she says, right in the middle of the performance, I froze to a stop. Art and life seemed to be in conflict. The paradox of performance, I froze to a stop. The paradox was stunning, and this is in Rustam's book, published in 1995. Today, we recall her major productions, all of them uniquely challenging the structures of society and Bharatanatyam as a form. We largely tend to omit her reflexive years, early experiments, the art workshops, the posters for social movements, the screen printing she did and taught others, and the street theatre she did, and her dogged emphasis on keeping a femininity that sought groundedness, authenticity, and liberation at the center of her being and her art. As a theatre practitioner with primary focus on gender in all its messy, complicated intersections with caste, ethnicity, language, and sexuality, the different kinds of feminisms, including Chandra's that shaped me, lets me learn at every step. Feminism, unlike other isms, has no mastermind, and the pun is intended. So we work hard to trace the myriad cracks, address them with multiple emotions, even to the point of breaking into splinters. This bridge, Call My Back, as Chicana feminists Cherry Morega and Gloria Anazaldúa have called it, carries many identities, juggled by various systems, creatively confused by multiple emotions, and refuses to accept easy answers. To work on a sustained, ongoing commitment to solidarities then becomes a lifelong task. It demands open, flowing, compassionate listening, learning, and doing. An influential image of this kind of continuing solidarity, for me, is the weekly assembling of Mothers of Plaza de Mayo at the Square in Argentina on every Thursday in the evening from 1977 onwards. They go round the square while the names of the disappeared are being read aloud. They repeat, presente. One is present. We exist. Richa Nagar, next, calls this radical vulnerability in her book Radical Vulnerability, Development, Translation, Justice. She defines radical vulnerability as long-term journeys with companions in multiple sites and multiple moments that keeps us repositioning the subject by taking into account the fragile moments stored in our memory. The collectivity in that process is shaped by justice, ethics, and politics, the key words. Holding on to that radical vulnerability dearly, I would like to share the negotiations made by us in theatre, in our language and our land, regarding the nation, sexuality, gendered violence, and the endless wars all over the world, all around us. Nationalism. India's language policies have always been contentious for those of us who are Tamil speaking. Further, in the context of right-wing fundamentalism, Tamil literature associated iconically with Thiruvalluvar is a nightmare to the agenda of Hindutva. We'll move to the next. Especially in terms of caste. So that's the first image. There have been multiple efforts to saccharinize Thiruvalluvar and others and homogenize their ideas to fit within the Hindutva fold, and this has been met with protest. So you just have to Google for saccharinize Thiruvalluvar, you'll get many images. I just didn't want to do the PR work for saccharinize Thiruvalluvar. The emblem of the Tamil Nadu government after the Dravidian movements garnered political power was a quote from Thiruvalluvar, written somewhere between 3rd to 5th BCE. Pirappokum ella uyirkum. All beings are born equal. Even a new party formed by a political novice like actor Vijay begins by quoting the same line. As if that is not enough, we also have Ramalinga Vadalal, the second one, clad in white, once again saccharinaized, 1823 to 1874, who created a new secularized sect called Samarasa Suddha Sanmarga Sangam, Association of Pure Truth, of Equality and Universal Compassion. He opposed caste divisions, extended compassion to all living beings, and he actually said, Vadiya Paire Kandabodalam Vadine. Whenever I see a plant withering, my heart just goes out, it withers. Left behind a non-Vedic mode of worship without any idol, instituted a system of feeding people through Anaya, the stove that's never put out, and passed away, of course, mysteriously. And this was 1874. Pralayan, my co-traveller in theatre, did a play called Name, which means truth in Tamil, for the cultural jata led by IPTA in many states prior to the latest election. Yet another eyesore from the Tamil public sphere for the right-wingers is, of course, E.D.R. Periyar. They still can't saccharinize him, they can throw cow dung or whatever. Periyar's no-nonsense pragmatism and questioning of the status quo, religion, caste, gender, language, is anathema even to the farthest of the right-wing perspective. Here the intention is not to hail Tamil nationalism or Tamil Nadu as the hallowed counter to Indian nationalism. Feminism has cautioned us to look into the caste Hindu heteronormative patriarchy that continues to frame gender as a moral dictum in the Tamil context. We will turn to this too soon enough. So, 1992, the next slide. Yeah. 1992 shook us all in utter disbelief. With Babri Masjid demolition, to be an Indian citizen born in a Hindu family became frighteningly tied to Lord Rama. As a South Indian who was not alert or aware to communalism the way North or Delhi in particular was, as it was already shaken up by the anti-Sikh riots in 1984, I'm talking about the post-independent generation. 92 was a huge blow. Thus began our search for non-mythological, non-mainstream Hindu images of collective consciousness. The rich repertoire of Tamil classical texts provided a refuge. Inkula, fondly called Makkal Kavinyar or People's Poet, and a Marxist-Leninist became our co-traveling bard. He was born a low-caste Muslim belonging to the practice of medicine. I mean, when I wrote the line, this one line, it just gave me shivers because as long as he was alive, I don't think I've ever referred to Ingulab's caste or religion. And even after his death, he decided that his body will be given to the medical college. And the family also declined the Sahitya Academy Award, which was conferred on him posthumously. And I've translated Avai for Sahitya Academy. Hopefully, will get translated into Indian languages because English, I'm not so sure. There's a book compiled by Geeta Hariharan outside. This too is India, which contains a very brief introduction to that. So for us, the female bard of Sangam age, Avai, was very new. And thus began his journey for Ingula as a playwright for the next 2 decades, which has now left behind a stunningly creative and hopeful legacy for us. Now, Avai, the last one, is a statue that you find in Marina Beach. And that is a commonly found statue of Avai. old, pious, holding a stick, and very didactic in her lines. The next one is T.K. Shanmugam, when he did the play Avayar and took the female part of performing as Avayar in that play. And that was his first major female role in the modern Indian theatre. And the next one is K.B. Sundarabal in the film version, which is based on the play version of T.K. Shanmugam, which had all the mythological things. And of course, all of you know Chachi 420. That's Kamal Hassan, who took the film Avvai Shanmugi, the namesake, a remake of Mrs. Doubtfire. So don't ask me about acting, etc. I leave it to your imagination. But then what we came up with in '96 is Marudu's Avvai. So today in most circles, the only thing I asked Marudu, who is one of our major artists and who has worked with me now till the most recent play continuously, was give me a woman who doesn't have a bindi or hair. And then this is what he gave us. And we actually kind of, in most, at least the textbooks, etc., we at least juxtapose the older image of Avayar with this. That's all we have been able to do. But in terms of content, of course, Avvai provided us a scope to embody a vivacious, energetic performer, poet, and thinker, still untamed by patriarchy's claws. That she drank toddy and has a close male friend were seen as anti-Tamil in the southern districts of Tamil Nadu when the play was included in their college syllabus. Avvai drank toddy, unloved, wrote a popular headline of a magazine when protests rose regarding the inclusion of the text in college syllabus by the small group of BJP members then. Little did we know what we were going to face. So when the English book came out and the college where I worked, and we had a launch there with the students performing in English, the Avvai context, immediately the department came under scrutiny. Sometimes I feel English translations are scary. Inkulab went on to write the next slide. Manimegalai, a Buddhist epic, which had a head-on critique of caste system, referring to beef as the favorite meat of Vedic rituals. Kuriஞ்சிப்பாட்டு addressed people-made refugees in their own land, ecological devastation and violence, and he became more ambitious and experimental by juxtaposing Chief Seattle's address, poems from Palestine, Sri Lanka, Kurdistan as parallel texts. His Pulse Andire is based on a single poem assigned to a widowed queen in Sangam corpus, where there is a discussion on sati, and the discussion is led by a courtesan woman talking to a poet. And his Yaad in Amor, the last picture, we just put 1084 in homage to Maheshta Devi. So this was about the indentured laborers, the Tamils who went on to live in other places, contributing the word coolie to the English dictionary, laborers who laid the Siam Railway, the Sri Lankan Tamils who fled the country to work as menial workers in different countries and died en masse by its own army in the 3-decade-long ethnic war. This massacre, like now, was televised to all of us at that time. Inkulab's plays provided us an opportunity to reclaim non-Hindu mythological versions of our past. For us in Tamil context, this seems to come a bit, you don't need much prodding to go into this Tamil eulogization of Tamil. We have a long history of doing that. Our specific intervention in this, however, is that we did not idealize or romanticize the ancient Tamil images either. We reclaimed them with criticality that was expressed through creativity that helped us speak of our present, using ancient texts to retain the complexity and vibrance in our present, rather than to use the past to generalize, freeze, and create singular hegemonic renditions of the past, which is what we find all around us. So the creativity lays in this multi-pronged criticality, which refuses to accept easy answers, as said before, and embraces the complexity in order to sharply foreground creative social critique and dreams of another world. While Inkulab, the next slide, was wary of parochialism of Tamilness, his resources being the classical text meant that his work would lend itself to poetic eulogization of Tamil as a language. So many Tamil directors such as Pralayan, Balidasan is a Dravidian movement poet. So he took up Purachikavi, revolutionary poet, translate. It's actually a translation of a Sanskrit epic called Pilgrimiyam into Tamil, and he produced that play in 91. And Pariksha Jnani produced Anadurai's Chandramohan or Shivaji Kanda Hindu Samrajyam, which is every single word in that play is relevant to us today. So when the book on Shivaji came out from leftward, it was so very, it spoke to us in a way that we could connect it to what Anadurai was saying. And Ramasamy, a younger theatre director from Pondicherry, had produced recently in 2019 Hiranyan Alladhi Idayatra Veeran, where Hiranya of the Prahlada story becomes the Dravidian hero. Now the take next. V. Geeta, a feminist historian, offered an alternate inroad into Tamils and their his or her stories in all her work, including in her tries with playwriting. Maitri Shivaraman's book on her grandmother, with Uma Chakravarti's afterword, created an urgency in us to gather her stories from a recent past. Geeta shared her studies in the history of feminist thought in Tamil from late 19th century to mid 20th century in her first play, Kalakana. Geeta and I have written about the making and performing of Kalakana in detail in various places. It was a dissemination of feminist histories in Tamil Nadu and of themselves, and not as an additive to various moments and movements that women or feminists were part of. It's an archive of the ways in which being a thinking woman with a critical perspective that leaves no stone unturned, and being a woman with self-respect was brought into this movement. The women of self-respect movement in particular challenged various norms constantly. They questioned the blaming of the colonial rule to not address caste discrimination, religion based on gender discrimination, two women who do not want to part from one another agreeing to marry the same man, stating that since we don't want to be apart, let's marry the same man. And Kudiyarasu, they have published it, and also about contraception, about pleasure, about a whole lot of things. This celebratory play, in which views of women from diverse groups and across time and space talk to each other in the play. The play traveled to almost all districts in Tamil Nadu, women's groups, colleges, Periyarist organization, and NFAW. At the initiation of Uma Chakravarti, we also brought the play to JNU and managed to offer translations. This play helped us also identify the next generation of feminist leadership, both in cultural activism, as well as political activism. Kalpana, Maitri's daughter, Prema Revati, who runs a school, Vanavil, in Nagapatnam. Kavin Malar, who works with Chennai Kalaikaru largely and is a singer and works with school education departments. And Ponni Arasu. And also Shijit, Ponni is my daughter who splits her time between Sri Lanka and Tamil Nadu. And also Shijit Sundaram, who assisted in this production, has since evolved into a theatre worker within the queer movements of South India. The next generation enabled the formation of a loosely structured feminist group called Pengal Sandhipu, Women Meet, at that time. I want to share with you a small clip from Kalakanavu. This is Kunjidam, who was a self-respect movement leader, and she spoke in English. She was a BA honors, Telugu speaking, so she spoke in English, and Periyar's movement translated it and published it in Tamil. So what we had done is, retranslation or a back translation of that, because the text is not available in English today, and this is how we made her come across as modern when she opposed the colonial rule. So this is Queen Mary's College, the first women's college opened by the colonial government, and we did it in this hall at 4 o'clock in the evening, because that has been some learning that I had from Idua time, that if you really want women to come and watch your play, you choose a different time for them to come. So that was a learning for us. This was 2007, and but still, the euphoria of having found the history of our foremothers was not, it can't last. The question of what happened to those women of the self-respect movement after the 1950s made Geeta explore the early Dravidian movement's discourses. I would like to quote Tamil feminist historian and theatre worker Puni Arasu's doctoral dissertation, which begins with her comment on the opening show of Anmai Anmai, which we translate as Macho Macho. There's a poster. The name says it all. So it is C.N. Anagare, Karnanadi, all of them. In 2012, the feminist theatre collective Marakachi Theatre presented Macho Macho. The cast of this play included myself and other actors from a younger generation and from mixed socio-economic backgrounds, cultural and sexual identities, and across the spectrum of gender. The play was first performed to an intimate, small, invited audience of friends, comrades, professors, artists, politicians, and activists, those who were well versed in the progressive history of the politics of Tamil Nadu. The bulk of the script of the play used primary sources from 40s to 70s, from recorded speeches to newspaper and magazine spreads. The jokes, however, did not land. Laughter was absent, creating an ominous atmosphere of tension. The invited audience of mostly progressive scholars and public figures in contemporary Tamil Nadu could not bear to see their beloved political figures being critiqued by feminists. They were uncomfortable with the ways where their history was being depicted, even though every single primary source was footnoted visually on. We had a very limited run of the play. It was clear that the Dravidian or Tamil assertion against the nationhood of India could not stand the critique of masculinization of the Tamil public sphere being exposed, and that too by feminists, who could easily be rejected or cancelled, in today's words, as Tambram women by birth. I don't want to engage with this essentialization of identities, but I'm willing to take it up if there is a question. The play fleshed out the ways in which the Dravidian government, while mouthing subaltern liberation, joined hands with capitalism, prioritized non-Brahmin, non-Dalit social mobility, oppressed the tribal villages of Vachati, and reaped of gaps in its rhetoric and blatant disregard for their stated principles in everyday practice. The rhetoric had its foundation on a well-established misogyny. What stays with me is the what I call as feminist anthem for Tamil Nadu, written as a poem by Prema Revati, who was an actor and a poet, and made into a song by Indula. So it went: rationalism, annihilation of caste, women's liberation, class struggle, Tamil identity. We are connecting the points and speaking. This is a politics we need. Even if one is not omitted, it's indeed a problem. And the main cry was, Le sagumo, le sagumo. Will it ever become lighter, like the wings of a bird? Will it become lighter? So, and we actually have one line in that which says, Iri sollaga naanum ennudalum illada en Tamil ketpeno. Will I hear my Tamil, in which my body and my being are in a curse word? So, this is towards the end of it, which is what stays with me. This shift in questioning the binaries of Indian nationalism versus Dravidian or Tamil nationalism is crucial and complex in the way in which it manifests in politics in Tamil Nadu even today. The idealization of Tamil identity as a counter to hegemonic Indianness, or more recently Hindutva, cannot be left unquestioned for its own propagation of misogyny, patriarchy, casteism, capitalism, etc., of which all of us that has lent itself to the very same undemocratic, unequal, and violent systems and practices that this politics seems to question. So what Geeta did was to turn to Maitri Shivaraman's EPW articles, published again in Leftward, Maitri's writings, and she took two people. One is Sudalayamma, who with the play that talks about the first encounter death in Tamil Nadu, soon during the emergency period, and Siralam, who was a left activist, and a family belonged to CPM, and he was with the radical left. And but what Geeta focused on, and because she based her play on Antigone, was to actually make the voice of a graveyard keeper become the witness and tell us the events in her perspective. The second play, called Testimony, Vakamulam, is about a case of custodial violence fought by the wife of the victim by Nagamma. Geeta structured it based on Ariel Dorfman's Death and the Maiden in mind. What we needed in these plays were to create female protagonists who were political subjects, leading ordinary everyday life of eating, working, falling ill, washing, fetching water, etc. All of it seemed very extraordinary in the context of the violence that they were really faced with. It is here that we moved from recording our critique of the masculinized public sphere to actually placing on record ordinary women who have lived and fought extraordinary struggles for justice. And I think that's the last play that Maitri actually saw in one of our rehearsals and could recognize the Nagamma because we based it on her article, clad in an yellow sari, carrying a bag in her hand with a big kumkum on her head. And the moment she saw, she almost waved to her, and it's a very moving memory that we had it. And we actually speeded up and made her watch the rehearsal because we were all worried about her health at that point. Geeta also wrote a play on the testimonies of women indentured laborers and Sri Lankan exiles called Karupi, the Black One. It opened up a whole new world of connecting histories of people related to the Tamil language across many faraway lands. What I'm going to show you is a clip of Mariamman Talatu, which existed in Guyana, and this is performed in English. clear that one can cross borders while also connecting to one's history. With Tingura, we dug into the texts that are held dear by those in the echelons of power in the Tamil context to find subversion and liberation. Gita's work enabled us to show the persistence, resistance, and survival of those marginalized within a world ruled by those in power. Another way Tamil and Tamil-speaking people have occupied our commitment and imagination was the war in Sri Lanka that victimized Tamil-speaking people for over 30 years. My work in Sri Lanka is primarily in Vattikula, in the northeast of the island. At the invitation of Surya Women's Development Center, a local women's organization that began in the refugee camps in Colombo in the 80s and has survived since, I'm from feminist scholar and academician and friend Chitralekha Maunaguru. I went there to do a theatre workshop to their cultural group in 98. I did not imagine at that time that I would continue my work there after 3 generations of artists have evolved in that group. Recently, the first batch of Surya Cultural team met again in person through texts, WhatsApp calls, and from various parts of the country and the world. I was speechless in utter gratitude. And they remembered our practice of theatre and shared with abandon the joy and energy. Somewhere, that theatre space has held them as they survived a war. And I'm honored and happy to have been part of it. But nostalgia is a luxury most of us can't afford. So this year, a team of women living with disabilities, the one on top, majority of whom are ex-combatants in the militant groups, have been wanting to create a play of their own. They are singers, and as child soldiers, their bodies had received physical training from a very young age. Vannangal or Colors, this group has now begun my journey with artists who are persons living with disabilities. The younger and present generation, of course, had other stories to say. They really wanted to address issues that were reinforcing the patriarchal power in their everyday reality. The play that evolved was a ball of energy, asking mundane questions that break the silence on everyday oppressions about forced marriage, about having to have a child, and the moralistic attitude that's imposed on them. With Poni living in Vattikula most of the time and working with them, and Kalyani, who has been in the group for 15 years, who has now evolved as a trainer, the group is stronger than ever before. To have sustained an all-women theatre group from young girls and women in and around semi-urban and rural areas in a land that is plagued by war, natural disaster and conflict, and now an economic crisis, is nothing short of a miracle. To have played a role in that for me is nothing short of a blessing. Such persistence, however, is not new for the women in the north and east of Sri Lanka. In 2022, when the nationwide protest to oust Rajapaksa was brutally suppressed in Sri Lanka, activists in Vattikula began the Vattikula Justice Walk. On February 4th, 2025, they will reach the 1000th day of the walk. When I joined them on their 100th day, it was a mind-blowing experience to walk in silence, in a single file, bearing placards on your body like billboards, together, however big or small the number may be, meant that you put your whole self out there. They walked from a church platform on the side of the road to a park with a Gandhi statue in it. A tree near the statue wears all their banners and sometimes artworks. So I really wanted to create a play and managed to create an outline of the play Nadai Nadayai, connecting this walk to the mothers of Plaza de Mayo and Mothers Front in Sri Lanka from the 1980s. Tony went on to do a non-verbal solo walk performance to commemorate 1 year of the walk with a sound score that captures the essence of the people's struggle in Sri Lanka. The walk in many ways has become an archive of myriad struggles for justice, for all the art created that expresses and bears witness to these struggles. While we know how art can travel to bear witness to, it is somehow always very deeply moving. For long in India, I have wondered that South Asia often refers to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh in the minds of many of us. This was subverted when Fayez Hum Dekhenge became the truly national, I put it in quotes, anthem during the anti-CAA struggles in India, as it was translated into many Indian languages, including Tamil. Poni and I translated it, and it has since been sung by many. During the Aragalaya in Sri Lanka, this song traveled to Sri Lanka and countries where diasporic Tamils lived. The journey of the song is such that we do not even know anymore if they even know that this is a translation from a song originally written in Urdu. I have thus built a home in Sri Lanka, particular for my theatre work, with Poni, Prema Revati and Ashwini from Chennai joining me in that effort. We have also managed to bring them here to Chennai and learn Koothal from Purisai Samandam. We still await Sri Lankan artists and academic communities to acknowledge the sustaining power of this group for almost 3 decades now. In a context where any interaction, especially political interaction, within that art-based connection feels impossible due to lack of resources, the sheer exhaustion we all feel fighting within our nation states, shrinking imaginations that urge us to ground our worldviews in all that we share rather than all that which divides us. Our ability to sustain this connection across the Indian Ocean for almost 2.5 decades as women and as feminists, through so many changing terrains in our lives and the world at large, is possible because of our shared commitment to theatre and is an eternal fountain of hope for all of us. I have already shared my entry into LGBTQIA+ movements in my writings. The first ever trans theatre group, Kannadi Kalekuru, was formed to demand government ID cards for them. The group dispersed after 2 plays, but much happened during the time they performed. They managed to receive ID cards, open bank accounts, document the needs of their communities, raise policy issues, and now we have a trans welfare committee in Tamil Nadu. With our play Nanga Reddy, which is based on Rumi Harish and Sunil Mohan of Bengaluru, we also consciously cast people with varied identities of gender and sexuality. Srijit Sundaram in his play Molagapudi, a short story by Bama, had already cast 2 trans women as both protagonists and antagonists in 2010. Of course, our effort to do the same in Bengaluru with the play Freedom Begum, again based on research by a TIS scholar Radhika, along with Rumi Harish and Sunil Mohan, failed. I just want to say that because I don't want to really romanticize what we mean by collectivism either. The reasons are complex, but the biggest casualty has been the loss of relationships, of solidarity and artistic collaboration that had extended for over 2 decades, and Freedom Begum is shelved right now, apart from a filmed copy that is in the archive. Today we have Revati's Vellemuri in exit. The Truth About My Life, published by Penguin. And we have a solo show based on that, which has crossed 125 shows nationally and internationally. She performs the play in Tamil, Kannada, Hindi, and also with English subtitles. The most moving thing is that Revati takes this play to government model schools as part of art education and speaks to students from 9th to 12th grade. For a person forced to drop out of school due to her gender identity, to enter her own school as a performer and a resource person is truly a turning point. Soumya, a young trans woman who began theatre with Srijit's play, has been in theatre for the past 15 years. She is my lead actor in the most recent play, Sripada. We perform a short 17-minute play based on Maya Angelou's Still I Rise and Phenomenal Women as Nonna Rupen, I Am a Woman. We opened it for Pride in June this year. And Soumya says, Maya Angelou, the party, the grandmother, seems to have written every single word for me. And I have bequeathed her this play to take forward as she sees fit. Mainstream theatre and progressive alternate theatres alike are still hesitant to work with queer bodies or themes on stage. To place queer bodies on stage has been a deeply creative and generative process for me that has questioned many of my own default ideas as a cis, heteronormative, heterosexual woman, a theatre maker, and a feminist. I am nourished by this challenge and all that it has enabled us to create. The queer community has taught me precious lessons of living with hurt pain, trauma, injustice, inequality, and rage, but with joy. It has also taught me that possibilities of survival and building new lives are available, albeit difficult, as long as we choose. How I wish I could give this speech without talking about violence, specifically sexual violence. But alas, sad that most of us are, our driving force seems to come from the violences that we encounter, some more public than others. A critic of dowry, rape laws, military, communal violence, sex-selective abortions, female infanticide, domestic abuse, child sexual abuse, the list is long and endless. The shock of having to address #MeToo, naming and shaming abusers, harassers, rapists, took most of us by storm. The younger generation of feminists made it crystal clear that the due processes we had fought for, all of us, the 70s onwards feminists, and were in place now did not alleviate the trauma, was too cumbersome, and did not yield justice. Geeta, in an unpublished piece, reflects on what our generation of the 70s did in the early 90s thus, and I quote her, "Intimate violence, we all came to realize, was the unspeakable secret, and we needed safe spaces to even name the act to ourselves, naming it in a group and coming to terms with it as a collective, however provisional, was free. In this sense, that was our #MeToo moment," unquote. Many of us, even today, continue to live with a baggage of unaddressed violations on multiple fronts. Often, we did not have the right words to articulate them. In India, Me Too itself was brewing since the Pink Cherry campaign, Slut Walk, and through groups like Pinjra Tod and Bikaf Asadi. We recall the Nirbhaya case that saw moral policing and normalizing sexist attitude as the basis of rape itself. Mallika Taneja's play, Thoda Dhyan Se, addressed precisely that. In one of those of you who have seen that play, you know that it became notorious for the nude scene that comes in the play. And in one of her interviews, she says how limiting it is to refer to just the nudity scene in that performance, and how ironic to refer to it as brave or courageous. She went on to perform allegedly as part of the Body of Evidence Stepping Stones project of Zuban Books. Zuban also commissioned performances in Bengaluru under the same project. In Chennai, the city where I live, many school students came out anonymously to report child sexual abuses committed by teachers for years on end, for generations. The pandemic perhaps gave them the pause needed to address this trauma in many of them. Soon, many schools in Tamil Nadu came under limelight on this issue. There were horrible stories of abuse, intimidation, normalization, and not to mention suicides. We met online at that time to collectively discuss the issue and decided to produce a play based on these reports. Our play, Ulluram, or Inner Resolve, evolved as a solo piece depicting a woman in her late 20s, recalling how she has rebuilt herself inch by inch in these 10 years after her schooling, and is now keen on enabling other children at school to not get exposed to this kind of violences anymore. Since we planned it as a campaign, we trained 3 artists initially and then 2 more joined, imagining that many would want us to bring this play in their forums. We opened formally at the SFI district conference in Dindigul, and then formally organized an event under the banner of SFI Central Chennai. But it did not take off in progressive circles or women's movement spaces. The big breakthrough came with government model schools, and they started Art in Education program. The play was part of teacher training for 5 batches. The first 2 batches were troubled but discussed the topic. The 3rd batch staged a walkout for what they saw as a singling out of the teaching profession. The 4th were moved enough to create a film on this theme. The 5th just tolerated the play. This was a top-down approach. So we were invited by the government department, and so they had to tolerate us. And when the first batch knew that we were going to perform, the second batch was already informed that this play will come. And the actors faced real difficulty. There were people who would directly call her, because she dresses up on stage to go and do a workshop in her school. So we show her beginning of the household exercises, taking care of herself while recalling all this. And one of them actually said, "You're coming and dancing with your jatti. Aren't you ashamed?" And they really thought that she was a plus two kid or something. She was an MA graduate, district level state level SFI leader and a member of the district committee of CPM Tamil Nadu. And this is, and she didn't even tell me because we were all cornered, and she didn't even tell me at that time. I said, "You should have raised it at that time." So it was a learning experience, even though it was a top-down experiment. For me personally, this play was a way of healing, way of letting out, a mode of assuring myself that theatre could still be a space for resistance. I was addressing my own personal trauma with regards to sexual violence. Me Too and the debates that followed brought home to me that I had worked with a predator under my very nose in the same theatre space that we had created. Acknowledging that meant giving up theatre and losing grip of oneself. Some of you had met me at that time, some 4 years ago, and know how traumatized I was at that time. Still do, but I'm just getting my voice back. Practically, for me to address it meant taking the issue to the Progressive Writers and Artists Association, since the predator, the rapist, was a leader in that forum then. It required a woman like actress Rohini, who is an office bearer of the organization, to even take up the issue at the organizational level seriously. My own sharing on personal terms to many fellow comrades and friends and leaders did not yield much responses, and that hurt, because I think when you move as comrades and also treat people as friends and they were part of our own life, and when they don't really stand with you on this with the same level of commitment, then it really hurt. It was difficult. It took 2 years to have the person leave the organization, even though there was more than enough proof from multiple survivors. Needless to say, the survivors could not divulge their identities of this evidence in public due to the social and legal violence they will be subject to if they were to do that. Similarly, when a famous modern writer in Tamil was outed as an abuser by a collective of male survivors and his younger brother, who runs the theatre group and is a director of the group and a well-known theatre personality, was blamed for being an enabler as he did not take any action even after the instances were brought to his notice. Once again, an impasse was struck. The writer was one of my closest friends. When I decided to marry my partner, we were a trio. The writer, myself, and Arasu, my partner, we were together, and I owe him all the initiation I had on Tamil literature. When we as theatre workers tried to publish a common statement condemning the perpetrators as theatre artists, even the social boycott of not engaging with them in public sphere has been difficult to achieve. It hurts when, despite the crimes being exposed in public, in the liberal progressive circles, they remain at best silent, at worst indifferent. It goes to prove that we are nowhere near even ready to actively listen to the trauma-inducing instances of grooming, continued harassment, and the normalizing of such behaviors in the name of art and politics. The least we can do is to stand by the survivors, is to isolate the abusers and protect possible future victims. To create a safe space, for me, was to learn how the hegemony that works within our own systems of work, even though we sound very politically correct. So that was a big learning. I'm aware that in India, many informal networks are formed towards this goal. The apathy of many senior artists, especially women, almost paralyzes me on some days. It is hard to accept that no one is exempted from the hegemonic systems at work. Despite these misgivings, Ulluram proved the efficacy of theatre and how important it was to engage the young minds in it. And also solidarity comes from an unexpected quarters sometimes. So there was a glimmer of hope this year in these dismal times. Our recent works, Triparvam, an anti-war play, unraveled through Gandhari and Kunti as our means to articulate our dismay about the Gaza war, which in turn triggered our memories of the war in Sri Lanka. We received support from Yana Sarahova of Ukraine, a theatre of the oppressed practitioner who shared her writing. Tara Hakim, a media artist living in Jordan, exiled from Palestine, did a 3-minute film on what they hold on to as dear when everything is crumbling. And Sarala Emmanuel, a Colombo-raised feminist living in Batticula for close to 3 decades, sent us images from Sri Lanka. Trotsky Marudu, the senior artist who's been with us for long, ended up drawing many new sketches and paintings, especially for this play. The Arab Lullaby, which I was planning to screen, I'm skipping that because it's a 5 to 6 minute long clip. The line that we end that lullaby is that Ayudangal Arungachiyavitil Goduvilka. Let weapons, the dream of weapons, being on display at museums, unused and redundant. And this was at the background of all the Gaza images that we had. Doing theatre today has to critically engage with our here and now. Our respective languages, the last slide. Regional politics, traditional and contemporary forms, myths and histories that are our burden and possibility. This doing has to be based on a process that grows out of the communities we engage with, especially the young, and out of the artistic collaborations across all borders and boundaries. This practice will keep us open to listen to diverse voices, respect the dignity of all bodies, and to take a stand for justice and vow to work towards it ethically. It is not easy, it is time consuming, it's laborious, it's complicated, it's messy, it's nuanced. It is also a potent way to keep ourselves alive and sustain ourselves and those around us through our art. I wish to get back to Chandralekha. She says, I quote, I know what it means to feel the chill in your spine. At that time, you have to pick yourselves up from the debris, as it were, and ask yourself, can art save me? What can art do for me? Does it have any meaning? Can it heal? Can dance give me back my spine? Unquote. So I end, can theatre give us back our spine? And I truly believe it can.
रंग कर्म के साथ मेरा रिश्ता बहुत कम है। आप इससे समझिए कि अभी कुछ समय पहले दिल्ली के नेशनल म्यूजियम फॉर मॉडर्न आर्ट में एक प्रदर्शनी थी जिसको लेके मैंने एक संपादकीय लिखा। वो मोदी जी की प्रशंसा में थी और जिसमें बहुत बड़े कलाकारों ने अपनी चित्र प्रदर्शनी की थी कि कैसे उन्होंने अपने थोड़े से वक्त में बहुत बड़े काम किए। जब मैंने वो संपादकीय लिखा तो मेरे किसी मित्र ने कहा कि आपको पेंटर्स से पहले रंगकर्मियों के बारे में लिखना चाहिए था। मैंने कहा कि मैं जानता नहीं हूं उनके बारे में, मैं तो जिस तरह के रंगकर्म से थोड़ा बहुत जुड़ा हुआ हूं, मैं यही जानता हूं कि रंगकर्म को प्रदूषित करना संभव नहीं है। उसने कहा कि नहीं, तो आपको पता नहीं है, रंगकर्म सबसे पहले प्रदूषित हुआ इस नए निजाम में और सबसे पहले वही घुटनों पर आया। तो ये मेरे लिए एक बहुत चौंकाने वाली खबर थी और आत्मग्लानि से भी भर देने वाली खबर थी, क्योंकि मैं जानता नहीं था कि रंगकर्म की दुनिया में क्या चल रहा है। तो आप समझ सकते हैं कि जब मैं इतना अज्ञानी हूं तो मेरे लिए मंगई के व्याख्यान में आने वाली बातें कितनी नई बातें। अब जब मैंने कहा कि रंगकर्म एक ऐसा माध्यम है जो मैं जिन लोगों से जुड़ा हुआ हूं या जहां तक मेरी पहुंच है उसकी वजह से मैं कभी सोचता नहीं था कि वो प्रदूषित हो सकता है, तो आप समझ सकते हैं कि एक तरह से मन में कहीं ये भी धारणा बनी हुई थी कि फॉर्म के साथ कंटेंट का कोई अनिवार्य सा रिश्ता होता है, जो कि नहीं होता। अब मुझे याद आया कि मैंने नुक्कड़ नाटक जैसे फॉर्म को सरकारी योजनाओं के प्रचार में इस्तेमाल होते हुए देखा है। तो अगर नुक्कड़ नाटक का वो इस्तेमाल हो सकता है तो रंग कर्म का कोई भी इस्तेमाल हो सकता है। और मंगई के पूरे व्याख्यान से जो चीज सबसे ज्यादा सुकून देने वाली नजर आती है वो ये कि हमारे पास प्रतिबद्ध कलाकार हैं और जो सामान्य रूप से जो रेडिकल सवाल हैं उनसे भी बहुत ज्यादा आगे जाकर उन सवालों को उठाते हैं। इस व्याख्यान से जो बात मुझे समझ में आती है वो ये कि खुद तरक्की पसंद कहे जाने वाले हिस्सों में भी कई प्रश्नों पर लोग खासे नाराज होते हैं अगर आप असुविधाजनक प्रश्न उठाएं। और ये तो खैर हम लोगों का भी अनुभव रहा है। असुविधाजनक प्रश्नों के सामने क्या स्थिति होती है ये हम लोगों ने बहुत पहले से अनुभव किया है। मैं अक्सर अपने मित्रों को ये किस्सा सुनाता हूँ कि मेरे पिताजी जो किसी जमाने में अनडिवाइडेड कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी के फुल टाइमर हुआ करते थे, उनके मुंह से मैं उनके कॉमरेड की बड़ी तारीफ सुनी। कॉमरेड सियाराम, इसके बारे में वो कहते थे कि उनके जैसा अद्भुत व्यक्ति बहुत कम हुआ है हमारे देखने में। जब उनके बारे में मैंने अपनी माँ के मुंह से सुना तो बिल्कुल अलग वर्जन था। उन्होंने कहा कि कॉमरेड सियाराम सुबह उठ जाते थे और जब अपनी खटिया पर बैठे रहते थे, उनकी पत्नी स्कूल में पढ़ाती थी, तो पत्नी दौड़ी हुई आती, उनके हाथ में दातून पकड़ा देती। कॉमरेड सियाराम वहीं बैठे हुए दातून उनको लाकर लोटे में पानी दिया जाता, फिर वो वही पानी से करते। और इस बीच में पत्नी का क्या काम होता था? वो दौड़कर सुबह सुबह खाना बना रही होती थी, बच्चों को तैयार कर रही होती थी, बच्चों को स्कूल भेजती थी। खाना तैयार हो तो कॉमरेड सियाराम के सामने वो खाना लाकर रखा जाता था और फिर उसके बाद वो स्कूल भागती थी। तो अगर मैं अपनी माँ की बात न सुनता तो मुझे तो ये पता ही नहीं चलता। तो आप जब अनुभवों से गुजरते हैं, और जैसा मंगई के पूरे व्याख्यान में उभर कर आया, ये सारे अनुभव रंगकर्म के दौरान असुविधाजनक सवालों को उठाने वाले अनुभव हैं। मतलब सारे नाम माफ कीजिएगा, मैं तो नाम भूल जाता हूँ। आपने खुद ही कहा था कि नाम याद रखना मुश्किल होगा हमारे लिए, तो वो सारे नाम मैं भूल जाता हूँ। लेकिन इनकलाब के लिखे हुए नाटक को लेकर और गीता जो अनुभव शेयर कर रही हैं इनके व्याख्यान में, उसको लेकर हम ये कह सकते हैं कि वो सारे मौके जहां फेमिनिज्म ने, स्त्रीवाद ने पहले से मौजूद तथाकथित रेडिकल विचारधाराओं पर प्रश्न उठाए या उनसे ये कहा कि आपके अंदर इन सवालों के लिए भी स्पेस होना चाहिए, वहां उनके साथ बहुत अच्छा नहीं हुआ। और इसीलिए बीच में एक जो हिस्सा आता है, मुझे लगता है कि वो बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण अंश है। क्या मैं उसको हिंदी में कह पाऊंगा? मैं ये देखना चाहता हूँ। जहाँ प्रेमा रेवती की एक कविता है जिसका अंग्रेजी में अनुवाद है और इनकलाब ने उसको गाने के रूप में भी पेश किया है। बुद्धिवाद, जाति विनाश, स्त्री की आजादी, वर्ग संघर्ष, तमिल पहचान, हम इन सभी बिंदुओं को जोड़ते हैं और इनके बारे में बात करते हैं। ये वो राजनीति है जिसकी हमें जरूरत है। अगर एक भी इसमें से मिटा दिया जाए तो ये एक समस्या है। क्या इसका अनुवाद भी अच्छा होगा? विल इट बी लाइटर? क्या ये क्या कहेंगे इसको?
हल्का नहीं चलेगा।
हाँ? हल्का नहीं चलेगा क्योंकि हल्के में बड़ा हल्कापन है। हल्का शब्द में बहुत हल्कापन है। तो ये जो इसकी टेक है जो मंगई ने गाकर भी सुनाया, इस टेक को छोड़ दें। जिससे मेरा मतलब था वो अंश में आपके सामने पढ़ चुका हूं। मुक्ति की कोई भी लड़ाई अकेले नहीं चल पाएगी। उस लड़ाई में इन सारे सवालों के लिए जगह बननी चाहिए। और हमने देखा है कि मुक्ति की सभी लड़ाइयों में कुछ न कुछ कमियां इस मायने में होती हैं। दलित स्वर उभर कर आए उनमें कुछ ही समय के बाद दलित स्त्रीवाद को बढ़ना पड़ा, क्योंकि कम से कम हिंदी के हल्के में दलित आंदोलन में तो मैंने देखा कि वहां स्त्री प्रश्नों पर इतनी ज्यादा चुप्पी थी कि स्त्रियों को आखिरकार उस पर सवाल उठाने पड़े, और दलित स्त्रीवाद के नाम से एक नया पूरा हिस्सा खड़ा हुआ। तो आप वर्ग का प्रश्न उठाते हैं, जाति और लिंग का प्रश्न छोड़ देते हैं। आप जाति का प्रश्न उठाते हैं, आपके लिए जेंडर का सवाल कोई मतलब नहीं रखता। आप राष्ट्रवाद नाम की एक बड़ी सी चीज उठाते हैं और उसमें ढेर सारे जरूरी सवालों को भुला मिला देते हैं, डाइल्यूट कर देते हैं। इन सब सवालों पर कैसे रंग कर रोशनी डाल सकता है, उनको समस्याग्रस्त बना सकता है और असुविधाजनक प्रश्न खड़े कर सकता है, ये इस व्याख्यान से हमारे सामने निकल कर आया। शुरू में व्याख्यान के आरंभिक हिस्से में तिरुवल्लुवर और वल्लला का जिक्र आया और कैसे इन्हें पिछले कुछ समय से इनका भगवाकरण करने की कोशिश की जा रही है, ये बात आई तो मुझे याद आया तमिल में स्वयं मंगई ने जो गीता हरिहरन का उपन्यास ट्रांसलेट किया है, आई हैव बिकम द टाइड, उसके कथानक में इसका हिस्सा बहुत बड़ा है और ये नाम नहीं है, लेकिन उसके कथानक में 3 पैरेलल कहानियां चलती हैं, जिसमें से एक कहानी इसी पर केंद्रित है कि कैसे एक प्रोफेसर जो निश्चित रूप से कलबुर्गी का औपन्यासिक अवतार है, वो एक शोध कर रहा है जिसमें पुराने जमाने में जाति व्यवस्था को तोड़ने वाले एक समूह ने बहुत बेहतरीन एक तरह से अपने सपने को आकार देने वाला काम किया था और वो उस जमाने में नष्ट कर दिया गया। और अब जाति व्यवस्था को तोड़ने वाले उसी समूह को भारतीय वर्ण व्यवस्था के अंदर जगह दी जा रही है, उसका भगवाकरण किया जा रहा है, उसकी पूजा की जा रही है, जिसने मूर्तियों का विरोध किया था उसकी मूर्ति बनाई जा रही है। ये सारी चीजें उस उपन्यास में बहुत अद्भुत तरीके से उभर कर आती हैं। मैं जब ये व्याख्यान सुन रहा था तो मुझे लगा कि आई हैव बिकम द टाइड का वो हिस्सा बिल्कुल मेरे सामने जीवंत रूप में आ रहा है। और इन लोगों को अवई, ये क्या नाम है, अवई का भी इसी तरह भगवाकरण करने की कोशिश हुई। इन सारी कोशिशों को उस रंगकर्म ने चुनौती दी और उसका वो रूप सामने रखा जिसकी हमें जरूरत थी। तो मित्रों, मैं यही कहूंगा कि इस व्याख्यान से मुझे बहुत कुछ सीखने का मौका मिला है और संभवतः इस तरह आप हमें बुलाते रहें तो मैं भी थोड़ा बहुत रंगकर्म के बारे में जान जाऊंगा और उतनी बचकानी बातें नहीं करूंगा जितनी बचकानी बातें कभी दोस्तों के बीच किया करता था। तो इसके लिए बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, इस बेहतरीन व्याख्यान के लिए आपका धन्यवाद, आपका शुक्रिया, सैल्यूट, और आप सब लोग यहाँ सुनते रहे इसका बहुत धन्यवाद।
Yes, so I have 2 questions related to, not necessarily related. One, that like 2 characters that appears in your, I think, adaptation. One is like Sudalai Amma, and another one is again coming from very like Mariamma. Both are coming from very ritual context. They both have their own kinds of like and so how like in terms of adaptation, like of course they have their own ritual context, their own kinds of different kinds of history, and perhaps if you are taking Dravidian politics, that kinds of politics, then there is also a process of rationalization that happens, and you are doing in very contemporary modern time. So what's the like kinds of engagement that you as a like maker, theatre maker, is doing with these figures? Second, that like of course like after Me Too movement and all these like have like new kinds of realization, but one way of thinking that like that as a women practitioner, as like maybe like alternative sexuality practitioners, one face different kinds of challenges, but thinking from other points of view, where like for example, if I take my own journey, the first time when I saw like girls wearing jeans in my village, I was quite upset. So So like, but again, when I'm becoming part of theater, I'm becoming part of university, I'm learning and learning many things as a part of like, so many things are also breaking. So do you also have some encounters where things were also like, broken down at a different level? One that like, you have like this whole Tam Graham kinds of label, and then you have like a very masculine Tamil politics that you also described. But I am quite sure that there should be some kinds of gray zone where these kinds of dialogues are still possible. Same way when you are talking about theatre practices where you have like a very male domination and that kinds of very like even like very gray or like complex kinds of gender operation that happens or that kinds of exploitation that happens, do also see some kinds of like encounter that also make me realize that okay, I want to change. I need to like make some kinds of transformation on my behalf, on my part, and I need to change myself.
Mariamman is ritual. And Mariamman like in the whole of South India, and I think we have similar folk deities in other parts of the country as well, is either a single woman, usually wrong, but we don't even hear about, like Mariamman's certain avatars have rare common, only that it, where there is domestic abuse, Parashrama ordered kills her and things like that. But Mariamma herself is by herself, usually guarded by her son, Sudhiramadin or other people, and they are guardians of the borders, village borders. And the people who went as indentured laborers carried Mariamma with them. They even lost the language, but they kept on to Mariamman temple and all that. So in that sense, it is very closely associated with majority, because even the upper caste and the upper rung of the caste hierarchy, they also are afraid of Mariamman. But it is generally the god of the lower rung of the people, and the instrument is Dalit instrument. That was the intention, and they still do it. In Trinidad and other places, they still have those instruments. Even though they don't openly, they actually still talk about whether it's goat skin or the buffalo skin, which is usually made of the tapu in Tamil Nadu. Sudalayamma is just a proper name, also describing graveyard keeper. So she's somebody who is Sudalai is just graveyard. So she's a worker there, and she keeps to it. So Sudalayamma doesn't have anything to do with worship. In the performance, actually, we connected to both Christian All Souls Day and Tiruvasagam, where it talks about the different beings. If you know Ilayaraja's thing, Pullahi, Pudagi, Purusha, so you become so many beings around you on this earth, like grass or worm or tree or leaf or whatever. But you really know that this is impermanent. So it sounds philosophical, but it also talks about that. So that's the question. About the Me Too thing, I think the buzz is there, thanks to the younger women who managed to get together, who managed to talk to people and reach out. And I think it's an ongoing thing. Every state seems to come up every now and then, something or the other. And at the most, you can just be there and tell them that you're listening. That's it. I don't think there's much. But the buzz, I hope, will not die. And the kind of thing that you were talking about, in terms of understanding masculinity, in a way actually began much earlier, in the early 2000s, where I think Kamala Basin had that small little booklet about masculinity. And many of the queer movements actually kind of used it. And of course, violence. And there's a lot of mental health people who are getting into it. So, but I don't think there is light at the end of the tunnel. I'm sorry, but that seems to be the case because it weighs you down. Because we really don't know how to address the issue of providing a safe space, and that is not gender. That question is for everybody. About can the genders that are not enjoying any privilege learn to articulate? Probably that it comes from there, which is what the women's movement began with, dowry or rape, or so it talked about it's not about you. The problem is not with you. The problem is with the other party. So just like in caste discourses, where we say, unless you question the privilege of your own caste and your own subjectivity, which comes with privileges of caste, class, education, English, everything. Unless we do that, we cannot really create a safe space. And which is why the hegemony is so ingrained. Sadly, even in progressive circles. And I'm all with the younger practitioners who are very impatient. It's difficult when you're working on something, when something like this comes up and everything comes to a stall. You have to take a call about whether you want to continue with the work or address this. It's a really huge dilemma. But I think we can't take the easy way out. I think. So in that sense, I am personally, I was married when I began theatre, also had a child very young. Except that where we lived, we needed to create this idea of respectability. So whoever is dropping you after the show has to wait till the husband opens the door and says a hello in a sleepy voice, and then you go in. So both inside and outside, but those were the things. In fact, recently I was telling Arasu, my partner, I said, in many ways, somehow, because we work differently in different fields, but then the status of being married in some way as a heterosexual person and of course a mother somehow acts as a shield. And however much you want to be a non-cisgender heterosexual woman, I will not be able to put myself in the position of other women. And I hear that. I have a student here who has worked with me when she was a student, and she has worked with me on at least 3 plays. Nandita, where I don't know. Yeah. So she knows how the students are willing to share, and we just have no time. And the institutions, of course, apart from the due process, unless you give something in writing, you're willing to name yourself, you're not going to be taken seriously. Now, when a woman is saying on that day, it may be hyperbolic, it may be too emotional, too difficult for you to hear, but if she's deciding to say it, either in anger or in anguish, that's it, you listen. I think that's all we need to cultivate. And that seems to be very, very difficult. Especially when we are working towards something and there is time crunch and other issues, it becomes really difficult.
Mangai, you theorize your work. So I just want to know the creative process when you write or when you create a play. So is that theoretical construct already in your mind? That's what you are putting to it, or you are creating the thing because that's something you have already in mind. Because the way you dissect it out, the theoretical construct becomes very clear. So how the process works? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. British thanks. If it is, I don't know, because I think when they are text-based, especially the Tamil literature kind of thing, I can't read classical Tamil. So the collaborative work begins way before you take it to the floor. And I still remember in the first play to Inglav, I said, you can't come to the rehearsal, because he will expect proper pronunciation of Tamil, la, 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 all that. And I'm sure my actors can't do that, And this is classical Tamil, and I had many Tamil literature people as part of my cast, but still, so the actual workshop is like what we all do. So you have the thematic or the emotive mapping. Now on hindsight, I feel I either have the beginning or the end before I begin. And when I have it, I know where I want to go. So that's how it feels now. But on the ground, I think it is as grinding as any other improvisatory devised kind of work. Like the Uluram, the one on child sexual abuse. We just had so many Instagram and whatever, some 4,000 posts, which was taken to the rehearsal spot. But it was online. So it was shared with people and they were asked to really pick and choose whichever kind of touched them. And then the text evolved from there. So I think, So there is a lot of, I think, in the head, somewhere subconsciously it keeps working. But you never know what's really going to happen. In the play itself. So, even in our recent plays, Sri Parvam, we have Gandhari because she's the only person, one can correct me if I'm wrong, but textually I had Kumkum Roy who literally, I wanted to read only one chapter, Sri Parvam, but she actually made me read so many because she was connecting it to various Parvudyo, Parvada, this and everything. And it was new learning, and I realized Gandhari is the only one who says Yato Dharma Tato Vijay. Let justice win. And she said it when Duryodhana comes to take leave of her. I also went back to Andayuk because that text is already there. But that still focuses on Vidur and Dhritarashtra and Sanjay's texts, which are there in Sri Parvam. But then I wanted just this from Gandhari. So we didn't have no Vidur, no Dhritarashtra, only Gandhari is there. And then in the process, we also realized that Kunti says just one line at the end of Sri Parva and says, Dharma, you and your brother should do the last rites for Karna. Just that one line, But then we were looking for various references and a lot of discussions went back and forth. So we had a really long soliloquy kind of thing for Kunti, which is the inner war. What does it take for a woman to tell a grown-up son and a king at that she had an unwed child when she was not married, So what must it have taken? And she was part of the status quo. She did everything quite selfishly, So I don't think she did anything proactively, not even that little bit like Gandhari. And Maheshwata Devi captures it so well in After Kurukshetra, because she says how Gandhari holds Kunti by her hand and says, why are your hands cold? Until she knows that Kunti is thinking about, reflecting about some of the things that she did, including killing the 5 tribals in the Lac Palace. So, So the text itself, what to take from the text itself took about 3 months. And then on the ground, it's like 3 to 4 months. So, which is what I did. But at one point, in fact, I had asked Geeta that she should do the text, and then she said, this kind of rereading and connecting it to Gaza doesn't work with me. And I valued her opinion, because that's one way to really approach, and it's a bit of an over-reading to build it into Mahabharata. So then I was forced to write it. 5 years so far. But most often it's forced, and it comes from a lot of inputs from various other people, and your job is to just hold it together. in the way. So very often, till we go for performance, our script is not ready. If the actors don't have a final script half the time, they keep writing, rewriting, everything till we manage to go do at least 3-4 shows. And sometimes when the issues are very touchy, like the Me Too one, we did have all-female workshops first, and then had our other group members joining us, because I don't personally believe in just all-female work. Wherever it offers, I've done it, but I don't think that's where I come from. So we do have a mixed gender, mixed sexuality, not so much, I would say, of class difference, I guess. But the queer people bring that in, so in terms of education, etc. So there are times when we needed to have that personal time. And also to see in close quarters, they came thinking that they can act, but once the theme was exploding in them, it became difficult. Whereas the trans people, they also shared their stories, which became plays. And in fact, much later now, when I asked one of the persons who was in the first play in 2002, and then she said, if you hadn't pushed us at that time, maybe we wouldn't have spoken. So it was important to take them to a platform where they are seen as people whom we should listen to. So I think, so it varies. Sometimes one is ready, sometimes one is not yet ready. And still there is a risk, especially if it is based on certain autobiographical elements, there is always a risk. But with Revati, I don't. Because Revati's name came up in Columbia Scroll, along with Toni Morrison and everybody. Students voted for her book and her name was there as a writer from India. So her sense of the self and leadership is phenomenal. So she's different. But not everybody begins there. So there is a way, you have to wait.
Like you also spoke in your lecture about this risk of essentialization of identity. And you said that you have also worked the queer play that you're saying, where the cast was queer. And then you just said that you prefer to have a mixed group. So again, to go back to your creative process, what is the difference that you find when you're working with certain actors and when you're working with a mixed group of actors with diverse identities, and how do you then negotiate as a writer, as a director, this whole question of essentialization of identity? Just does it bring something else to the table when certain group that you're working with and then there is a mixed group? Just trying to understand the process.
It troubles when it comes. So in fact, in the long interview that Anita Singh has published, I think I speak about the caste issue. Because when we were doing, till about 2000, the male members of our group were primarily first generation learners, most of them Dalits. And then the women, on the other hand, were either Cambran or upper middle caste and middle class, and, English educated, and Chennai, basically Chennai, the typical Chennai art kind of crowd. And I think I also messed it up because most of those actors were RSO students. And I speak about it to Anita Singh. And 99, the group that was traveling met with an accident. And one of our actors was very seriously injured. And the whole issue, we managed to save him. That's it. And we were working as part of Voicing Silence at that time with MS Swaminathan Foundation. So we managed to get some economic support, medical support. I mean, I have nothing to blame them. Both of them are gone now, but that led to my leaving the foundation. And I went back to it only now after Meena's passing. It took that long to even heal and breathe, So, and the whole issue was read as Dalit, non-Dalit, even though Ingulab was part of it. And Ingulab was in the same vehicle, which is why I said I don't remember identifying Ingulab by his caste, ever. I don't want to do it. I don't think I will ever do it in any other platform because I just feel like that, I feel small saying that. But he came from a very small place and he was there as a support. So it was a traumatic period. And many of them, that's when we reconstituted the group. A similar kind of doubt about should you continue to do theatre? Is it really going to be liberating? Came to me in 2000, which is when I took up a regular job. Otherwise, I thought I can survive as theatre person, which I may not have. But I took a job at that time, a bit late in my career actually. And similarly, the queer question also. So there are ways in which one has to prepare. Now not anymore, because after 2010, anyone who comes into our group knows that there will be mixed genders, mixed sexualities. So we tell them, like you are asking in a meeting, which pronoun would you prefer? So we tell them, you have to call us, but in endearment, even recent play, my main actor is Soumya, who is a trans woman. And this artist, the person who is doing the set, etc., endearing way, like you say, Tambi, Tambi, how do you translate? Yeah, but then, you are calling everybody, irrespective of gender. Tambi Nwada, Tambi Nwada. I also call women, men, I call Vada, which is a addition that you do for a male gender. So this person was calling everybody Tambi Vada, Tambi Vada. And she was passing by and she didn't even give him a look. She didn't complain, she didn't do anything, she just didn't respond. Now, I'm trying to be alert. What if I had missed it? Or somebody else, I still remember Living Smile Vidya was tying up a light or something. And she lives in Switzerland now and performs as well. And one of our early trans writer and artists. So the one who was helping her, adjusting, asking her to focus here, focus there, called her by the dead name. So we just had to, and knowing her, I thought she'll just jump, because she is a person of that kind. And then I just had to stop and tell them and make him say sorry. It slipped, it's difficult. I know Rumi Harish from before, and I'm used to calling the dead name. And I have to remember every time. So for at least 6 months, I told Rumi, please don't mind if I'm calling you for it comes because you're used to calling somebody by that name. So these are, small things, but I think they go a long way. And no body shaming, ever. Whether you have just delivered, you're put on weight, you're thin, you're not fitting into your 0 size, whatever, however young or old, they are worried about it and they want to talk about it, let them talk. That's different. But you don't say, you're going to do that dance, you can't ask like that. How do you know that body can't dance? So I think those are some of the things. But now I think I'm calmer. I'm really working on myself for the past 4 years. But it's not easy. And I'm not blaming anybody who's having an issue and is not able. I am not able to resolve it at that time. And there is no resolution at times. You just have to wait for each one to come to terms and understand and choose. The big word. I don't know whether there is really choice that exists like that, but each one has to reach on their own. And there cannot be any push workshop. But I know, especially if you want to have more women in your cast, you can't have them continuously for 2 months or even 2 weeks. Even 1 week is tough. So 3 days maximum, and then you come back after 10 days, start sometimes from the scratch. So today I think I would say about 25 full day rehearsal with approximately easily 12 hours, no, if it is a residential. Easily 12 hours. If it is residential.
Spread over 3 months.
Spread over 3 months.
20 days.
3 to even 4 months. So I can also now only function like that. Twice when NSD said 15 days, I said no. And I don't speak Hindi and I don't understand Hindi. Even to work with the writer, I need a lot of help. So and I can't do that. So it takes a bit of a time. We revisit. Sometimes I wait for the actor I need. Because there are some people who have been with you for over 2 decades, and also the older ones come back. That's something I'm happy about. And all these people, whether it's Prema Revati or Ponni, Kalpana of course doesn't have time now. But even she would say, call me only for workshop. I don't want to perform, but call me only for workshop. So they all want to come. And it's nice to know that they are active in very many forums and still think there is value in theatre. So that I feel is richly rewarding.
जो मेल अभिनेता थे वो महिलाओं का रोल करते थे, स्त्री का रोल करते थे। इनका एक मेल होते, पुरुष होते हुए भी स्त्री का रोल करते थे नाटक में। तो मैं ये जानना चाहती हूँ कि जैसे मैंने जय सुंदरी जो गुजरात में थे, उन्होंने अपने आत्मकथा में ये लिखा है कि तमाम स्त्रियां बाद में आकर उनको बताती थी, क्योंकि उस समय स्त्रियां स्टेज पे नहीं आती थी, तो उनको आके बताती थी कि आपको ये बात ऐसे रखनी चाहिए, ऐसे कहना चाहिए, ऐसे सजना चाहिए। तो जो महिलाओं की अंदर की फीलिंग थी स्त्रियों की, वो आके जय सुंदरी को बताया करती थी। तो ऐसा कोई अनुभव वहाँ है क्या? क्योंकि हिंदी प्रदेशों में क्योंकि नौटंकी की परंपरा बहुत पहले से चली आ रही थी, तो चाहे नौटंकी जो है फिर वही यहाँ आएगा कि वो लोअर कास्ट की औरतें करती थी डांस ड्रामा, या उससे पहले जो गणिका प्रथा थी उसमें जिस तरह चलते थे, तो फिर भी सवर्ण परिवारों की उच्च कुलीन महिलाओं का रोल जो है महिलाएं बहुत, मेरे ख्याल से इफ्ता ने उसको लेकर बहुत बड़ा कदम उठाया कि तमाम पढ़ी लिखी महिलाएं, बड़े बड़े कुलीन घरों की महिलाएं जो है वो नाटक के क्षेत्र में, एक्टिंग के क्षेत्र में आई सामने। और उससे पहले यहाँ भी ये प्रथा थी कि पुरुष जो है वो महिलाओं का रोल अदा करते थे, अपने शरीर से जो है स्त्री बनते थे और पूरी सजावट करते। तो तमिलनाडु में स्त्री आंदोलन की बात आप जो बराबर कर रहे हैं, तो ऐसे कोई अनुभव और भी हैं क्या जिन्होंने नाटक के क्षेत्र में आकर स्त्रीवाद को किस तरह आगे बढ़ाया या उसमें मदद की? क्योंकि महिलाएं जब जैसे कुमार या हम सब लोग महिला आंदोलन में बहुत हमने काम किया है, जो है इमरजेंसी के बाद से आगे बढ़कर, तो वहाँ तमिलनाडु में कब ये स्थिति शुरू हुई कि और कि चाहे मंडाल का तो बहुत पुराना जिक्र सुनते हैं या आपको महादेवी का सुनते हैं, या यहाँ पर एक जमाने में हिंदी में हम हीरा का समझते हैं, तो पर मॉडर्न उसमें 20वीं शताब्दी के बाद 19वीं सेंचुरी के बाद किस तरह नाटक के क्षेत्र में जो है महिलाओं की भागीदारी बढ़ी, स्त्रियों की भागीदारी किस तरह, क्योंकि आज जो स्थिति है वो आज से 100 साल पहले नहीं, वो कैसे धीरे धीरे आगे आई, उसको किस तरह कॉन्सेप्ट के रूप में समझते हैं।
Yeah, that's one thing because T.K. Shanmugam didn't play three part so much. But then name it, MGR, Shivaji Ganeshan, all the big names in our acting career, they have all started as three parts. And that has existed. And in fact, Anuradha's Sundari comes in really, really helpful because Pamal Samanam Mudaliyar, who we call as the father of early modern Tamil theatre and urban theatre. So he was doing it, he was a lawyer, ended up as a judge, and he had Rangavadi Velu, who was his three-part actor for 23 years on stage. And I mean, this is a new revelation for me because only now I have unearthed this relationship that these two people had. And he speaks so fondly. His books are dedicated to Pamal's parents and to this one actor. And when he passes, Pamal just, couldn't get over the grief. And that's when he does the parody, Chandrahari, as against Harichandra. But Tamil Nadu, I think women came onto stage, just like Kannada, I think Marathi also, late 19th century, early 20th century. And in fact, we had Balamani Ammal, who ran an I should call it all girls company, because we call them boys company. But Balamani Ammal ran girls company. I still don't know the date. I've written a detailed essay on it in EPW. So I'm roughly dating her to somewhere 1890 to 1922, because this T.K. Shanmugam, he was a young person, and when his master, another major drama person, Safdar Hashmi, dies, she comes, performs, collects the funds for the group to go back to Madurai. And he refers to it. And he says she was old. And by old, it can be anything above 55. So Balamani Ammal, who is referred to in a French travelogue, who is drawn by Ravi Verma, and she existed. So now in Tamil theatre history, I include her name along with, all your other stalwarts, but nobody does, including Pamal, who has written like 1,000 and more pages on Tamil theatre history. He says, the Amma Pannanga, that lady did something. That's how he mentions. But she has helped at least 60 women to stay there, built she lived in Kumbakonam, which is where Ravi Verma meets her. So now we have managed to trace it. And she is the first person in that book, Drama Queen. My contention with that article was that it was not substantiated. We still don't know whether she belonged to the courtesan community, Devadasi community. And as you know, that was a heated debate also. But even now, I think there are women who play male parts and men who play the female parts, especially when it is body obscene dances and comedy roles, they still perform. And closer home to me will be K.P. Janaki Amma.
One thing was that even though your presentation is so firmly located in Tamil Nadu, but somehow one didn't get the sense in terms of what the rebel movement gave out as possibilities and where the obstacles. It's there, but I thought that if we're talking about social challenges, because there's also a tendency to think that, rebel, is so there's both the possibilities and I was just wondering that maybe something could be said, because for us also here, it's easy to sort of put everything on this, but the working of that ideology
technology in its daily practice and its ability to influence thought and action and motivate hold political force, that still has to be contended with and it cannot be. So I was just wondering. Rekha, by the way, in Tamil Nadu, the women's organization which say, some of us, it started in 1973, before the independence. And all these people were part of. Some of that in the yes.
I mean, I didn't have much time to discuss macho, but I think that is exactly what Geeta was trying to say. While acknowledging that there was this new flourishing subaltern public in terms of education, in terms of job, etc., the masculinity remained unquestioned. So that part, which is why in the early years of Anandare is when Pachati happened, and in fact, but then there were other reforms that really began at that time. So without discounting the point that you are saying, the possibilities that have come up, but when we question it with a gendered lens, it still becomes a problem, which is why we still have Dalit violence, we have custodial violences, we have police encounter killings like that, So, I think the government has to answer. While I work, I worked for the government model school, which is different. But I think the way to really address these cracks that are there, while social justice plans came into place, I think needs to be fleshed out. But in terms of education, the idea of reservation, which the rest of the country came so belated, I think one of Uma's articles talks about it, Mandal Commission, when the young women said, we don't want unemployed husbands. So that will never happen. I personally didn't know that in the house I grew in for at least 16, 17 years, that caste would be a major issue when I chose my partner. But even then, my parents were very reticent. Initially, of course, your overwhelming outbursts, there were one or two comments. But otherwise, I recently went back to the letters my parents wrote to me. Very difficult to read, but when they sent it, not once had they mentioned about caste. They were against politics. In fact, my mother at one place says, don't give me these stories about comrade. I don't want to hear that. We didn't raise you up to go and give a public talk. That's what my mother has written. And they were very clever. And our house, because that was the time when BJP was lying low. I don't think we had people who pride themselves of being damn dance. They were at least scared. Probably. I don't know. I have never felt it when I grew up. But now, my younger brothers and siblings would go, they would go to the great Rama's place and send pictures. And you don't know, how you grew up with these people. And it's belief and you can't hurt their sentiments. So you hold back and so the way
Things like Parashakti and so on, which is actually such a strong critique of caste, and so popular as far as
In fact, that KB Sundarabal, the next one, not the Sri part, the other woman, KB Sundarabal was a Congress worker, and she becomes a widow. It was not a proper marriage, but when the partner died, she didn't. She decided to wear white, khadi, etc., and sing only in Congress platforms. She is the one who performs Abhaya in a very asexualized fashion. And that was the time when Parashakti comes. And in her youth, she had performed male roles. She would do the Murugan, and because she was darker, and the partner was fairer in color, Kitapa, and he would do a Bali, So that kind of gender shifting and cross dressing was, and it still exists. If you go to down south districts, it still exists.
Still exists in Telugu.
Yeah.
Street plays it still exists. It's mostly the men who acts as women.
Yeah. Especially ritual context, because Kuthu we have now got other women who are learning, and there are women-led companies that have come up. But thanks to one school which really admitted children, Hannah's Katakuttu school in Punjarasantangal in Kanchipuram, so single-handedly they have raised so many of them. So when the women become part of that form, there's a lot of changes that comes with it. But then they're still kept as people who will take festival plays. To build them into an overnight performance, run it by a woman. There is Tilaka. There's an artist called Tilagavati who performs and runs her own group.